Welcome back to the Four Pillar Podcast. We stand for faith, family, fitness, and finance in that order. Thank you for listening today. We are talking about building lasting habits for success, which is really important, obviously. And we thought this would be a good topic going into the new year with everybody doing goals and creating new goals and all that good stuff as well. And essentially, by the habits and rituals that you create as well will help you set up your goals for success and help you have success as you go into the new year. And even trying to analyze what maybe bad habits you have, and you're trying to break those and change those, because a lot of the time it is getting rid of the bad habits or changing the bad habits as well as creating new ones, and reinforcing what you need to do to be successful. So that is what we're going to talk about today. Why, kind of understanding what habits are and why they're crucial, and some actual tools that you can take away and use to help you be successful at creating new habits and breaking old habits.
Yeah. Also, if there's some background noise, our son is in the room with us. He's 8 months old, so he's going to randomly chime in here and there.
Yeah, he'll have his opinions on what habits are. So what do you think habits are?
When I hear habits, I think of just basically the routine things that you do. And something like what you do, Ian, is like when you wake up, you go do your cold plunge, you read your Bible, you journal. Like that's a habit that you do. That's your routine.
Right. And I consider those probably good habits as well, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. One bad habit of mine is not having a good morning routine. I kind of just take care of the kids and I don't really make a whole lot of time for other things, but I'm trying to get better. So this will be a lot of conviction on my end, this podcast.
And I think as well, the habits you put in your life, then we'll get into a little bit what the difference between a ritual and a habit is, because I define those as something different. But I mean, they are similar, but they also are different at the same time. But essentially, the neurological process of a habit is, some people call it a cue, or I like to use the word trigger. I just like the word trigger better, but a cue or a trigger that causes a routine that essentially gives you a reward. And the reward doesn't have to be, for an example, something, spontaneously or whatever, but essentially it can be a delayed gratification reward, because maybe waking up an hour early to have your tennis shoes right beside the bed to put them on, and then it means you go right to the gym and work out, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that reward isn't very maybe instantly, because, right, essentially going to the gym is kind of hard, and exercising is hard, and
Right.
quotations, a good stressful, but it still generates a different type of dopamine hit in your brain from the reward of waking up, going to the gym, and doing your exercise routine. So when you essentially break down and look at, he's happy you picked him up. When you look at the process of actually understanding a habit, it's very, very important, is having that trigger, and then having the whatever that thing is that you're going to do, the routine or the item that you're doing, and then identifying what the reward or the outcome is for that habit.
Right.
As I just described a good habit, so a example of a bad habit is if someone smokes cigarettes.
Right.
Like, this is a very easy one to use, because so for example, a trigger is maybe something stressful happens. Anything could happen, that by a stress response, like a bad stress response, could trigger you to, then I need to smoke a cigarette, and the reward is you feel better or less stressed in that moment.
Right.
And that would be like essentially a bad trigger routine and reward process that is also then very hard to break. because of the dopamine and the reward response you get from the
Mm-hmm.
triggered event that comes on from that sequence.
Absolutely. I have a really bad habit of comfort eating, and it's always like sweets. So that's that like dopamine hit. Even it sounds weird because you just brought up cigarettes and the dopamine hit, but you have
Right.
that when you eat sugar too.
Well, right, and it could be the same thing when people stress eat as well. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, I mean anything like that, like stress eating is essentially. I mean, yeah, I mean this sounds bad, but comparable to smoking cigarettes almost. I mean, as far as the trigger,
Yeah.
the trigger, the actual habit, and then the reward afterwards, it actually does about the same thing.
Right.
So, but then obviously you can see how having a good or bad habits in your daily life can either positively or negatively affect how your life and what you do on a daily basis
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yeah.
So, um, and that's so I a good book recommendation as well too if you like to read, and a lot of this information comes from books, and they've done studies on it, and they have all the cited resources with the research and all the stuff. But two main books that I like is The Power of Habits, the Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and then the other one is Atomic Habits by James Clear, and they actually break down the stuff very informatively and cite all they do a bunch of research articles, statistics about all this and how this works. So it's super fascinating. But then yeah, so we kind of already talked a little bit about. So we're going to start getting into what is how do you form a good habit, and like I said, it's essential to understand that you need to know a trigger, and you need to know what the trigger is, what the item is that you're doing, and then what the reward is, because that's essentially how your brain creates what we call essentially a looping pattern
Yeah.
with whatever your habit is. Do you have any thoughts or
No, I'm
questions?
kind of. You've told me all this, but I'm kind of learning. Again, I'm not the best at this, so this is more of a conviction for me. Um, I think I can get really used to the mundane, which I think a lot of people kind of struggle with this, but being a stay at home mom, kind of a working mom as well, it's just my routine kind of goes around the kids. So I can make a lot of excuses for not creating healthy habits, but at the end of the day, they are excuses. So I'm kind
Sure.
of just learning right now, too.
And I know someone's like a lot of say this. So Dr. Maxwell, this comes from a guy in the 1960s that like everyone has a popular idea of it takes 21 days to form a consistent habit
Mm-hmm.
or to build that habit. I mean, yeah, you could roughly say that's true. The new kind of studies that came out in the early / late kind of 2000s are roughly between 66 days
Oh,
for
really?
you to actually create a behavior that is like automatic in your response to whatever you're doing. And
Okay.
so I mean, yeah, you can create a new habit within a couple weeks, right, or
Yeah.
whatever. But for it to become more of an automatic response and the
Mm-hmm.
looping mechanism that your brain does, it realistically takes a little bit longer for it to become automatic. I mean, in the study, it just says between 18 and 254 days to
Okay.
actually to develop that habit. Like I said, you can develop it in a short amount of time, but for it to become more automatic,
Yeah.
it typically does take a little bit longer of a time to do that.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah, it's be pretty interesting. So I want to talk about how do we start building good habits, and I think the thing before we get to how to break down old habits, I think sometimes what's even easier is to start some new habits.
Mm-hmm.
So for an example, we can just use this like the new year and for exercising or working out, right? So you want to lose weight, which is a great goal as well. Like you can set that goal and kind of break it down, but then you can also develop a habit to maybe help yourself go to the gym every day or the days that you want to go to the gym. And so, for example, you need to obviously you want to think about trying to start small and make it manageable. Be consistent in that item, and I think it's beneficial to track progress. Like I'm a big person of journaling, so you don't have to get overwhelmed with this. But if you pick one or two things that you're going to track, so tracking going to the gym, you can make a pretty simple checklist or whatever, or write down in a notebook the days that you go to the gym every single time. And that kind of gives you a backlog of the days that you were successful versus maybe unsuccessful. And what's really important with this as well, too, then is trying to create a trigger to allow you to execute on what you want to do. And then also make it, make it so you have a reward afterwards, or some sort of reward. Excuse me. Excuse me. So one thing that I tell people, so if you want to go to the gym, and you kind of define that if you're going to go to the gym after work, right? And so you say, okay, I want to work out. Let's even say you say every single day, right? I want to work out every single day. So you have your time that you're going to work out. So say you get off at 4:00, right? Um, the easiest thing to do is, for an example, a trigger that you could do is you could have your workout clothes or your shoes in your car. So the night before, throw your workout clothes and keep your workout shoes in your car, and the clothes you're going to work out in, put them in your bag and throw them in your car, right? And so your trigger is after you get off work, you're going to drive straight to you're going to put your shoes on, then you're going to drive straight to the gym after work. So your trigger is you go out to your car, you take your work shoes off, put your sneakers on or whatever, and then you drive straight to the gym. So that's kind of like a cue or a trigger that you're developing, is I go to my car, put my shoes on, and then drive directly to the gym after work.
Right.
And so that would be like a trigger, and more or less the trigger is actually probably the shoes that you're switching off and then initiating yourself to drive to the gym. And then obviously working out gets a little more difficult because it is kind of stressful or hard to exercise. It's not, essentially easy per se, because you're trying to essentially exert yourself to make yourself better. So, but one thing is, I've never heard anybody say after they got done with a workout that they regretted working out.
Right.
Most generally, right? I mean, because of it's a delayed gratification thing, which delayed gratification just means that you essentially are delaying your, you could say, happiness or joy, or that the good feeling, that good response you get is just delayed, instead of like where I'm sure you've ate a bar of chocolate or something and you kind of like instantly feel happy afterwards.
Right.
Like that would be like instant gratification, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But then like delayed gratification would be like, I have to like work out first, then I can eat a bar of chocolate or something like that.
For sure.
But it develops that delayed gratification. And then so after you get done working out, like I said, most people don't regret going to work out. And then you have that dopamine hit and feeling good after you get done working out. And that's kind of like your reward. Yeah. And if you want to take it a step farther, right, you could give yourself something as a reward after you even got done working out. Mm-hmm. If it's even, now I know you're trying to develop healthy habits, but it's, I think the best time to eat carbohydrates. Yeah, you have something for that? Okay. I had tissues in my pocket.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
If you want one of those for him.
Okay.
I think obviously one of the easiest things you can do as well is like obviously after you work out, your body needs carbohydrates, or it's a good time to eat carbohydrates. Your body is going to use them more appropriately than if you just ate them randomly during the day while you're sitting at your office chair, kind of thing.
Right.
So that could be a very easy thing, is okay, I'm going to have like my protein bar that I really like, or I'm going to eat, whatever that thing is. Maybe it's like I'm going to eat a one Reese's cup or something, right, after I get done working out. Because maybe at that point, it might be more important to develop that that habit of actually going to the gym, right? And then like the long term of things, a one Reese's cup or whatever is not going to probably hinder your health and fitness ability, right? In the long term of things, developing that habit of exercising or working out is going to be 10 times more important over
Absolutely.
the long term of things. And so that's kind of like a breakdown of how you could essentially establish a trigger, right, which leads you to an action. So the trigger is putting your shoes on, driving straight to the gym, and then the action is making you do your workout routine. And then the reward is one, you're going to feel better after you're done working out, but then you could also give yourself an additional reward, whatever that thing is. I mean, I know this sounds cheesy, but you could literally give yourself a gold star in a refrigerator.
Right.
There's a lot of scientific research behind that. Like, it seems super silly, but like, yeah, if it, like, and it works really well for kids and stuff like that. But
Right.
just you're basically recognizing a reward of you accomplishing something by doing that. It's not that
Mhm.
it's like cool to get a gold star per se, but like, if you just can have a way you identify and recognize that you had success,
Right.
reinforces that reward process in your brain. That's why they say, "Oh, we give you a gold star for the
Yeah.
whole." It kind of turns into a joke. Oh, you want a gold star for that? But
Yeah.
it actually does reinforce the correct brain pattern that you're trying to
Right.
accomplish.
I've heard of people like they listen to their favorite podcast when they're walking on the treadmill.
Yeah, that's a good
So that's
one.
a reward because you're being entertained, but they won't listen to it unless they're on the treadmill.
Yeah, well, and that's actually a really interesting one as well too, because it's actually a trigger as well too.
Yeah.
Right? If you think about it, so I'm going to put my headphones on, turn on that podcast, which then means I'm going to get on the treadmill, which then is also rewarding you because that's a podcast you want to listen to. So, yeah, that's actually a really good one for you to do, like cardio training or to work out as well too.
Yeah.
And with that is once you have that item developed, it is really important to have consistency. So something that I did that was really beneficial, that was maintainable as well too, is like, for an example, is it really maintainable or really that important to work out every single day, right? Like for an hour, like, I mean, killing yourself working out hard, no, right? No. And a lot of times probably people would say you actually would be overtraining potentially. Now, one thing you can do is that helped me, because I always had the mindset of like, oh, I have to like go work out for an hour for it to count as a workout, right? Um, I honestly can't remember the book I read it from, but the guy used it for his clients that no matter what, you had to work out for 10 minutes every single day.
Okay.
So once you develop that routine, right, so you don't break it, um, it was more powerful to, like, so let's say you only work out 4 days a week, right, or like your main workout days, every single day at the same time, like even on your off days, or even if you don't even feel like working out that day, or you're sick, like whatever the thing is, go to the gym and just tell yourself you're going to work out for 10 minutes or 5 minutes. And some days you're going to have it where you're going to go in the gym and you may only work out for 10 minutes. Like you're going to walk on the treadmill for 10 minutes. You're going to lift weights for 5 or 10 minutes. And you're like, I'm not feeling it. I'm done. Right. And that's fine. You still worked out.
Yeah.
You still did your trigger. You still did your action. And then you still are essentially getting your reward.
Yeah.
But that is also then contributing to the biggest factor of success is consistency. The only reason people aren't successful is because they don't have consistency usually when it comes to, I mean, I think a lot of things from business to their health and fitness as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you just consistently do something over and over again for a long enough period, you're going to have results on that item, I think anyway.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, I mean, this has a lot to do with those SMART goals as well, and creating the SMART goals. I mean, creating habits around those SMART goals.
Right.
Such as, like, if you want to lose weight, yeah, that's a goal. Let's narrow that down, make a SMART goal, and then make a habit around it.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once you have your goals defined, then you can set up a a trigger, a action,
Yeah.
and a reward to actually accomplish that goal. So, like, for example, one thing that I did that was I always had trouble with, but I actually did this and it was very successful. And this is an example that you could do this in your own life or take it and use it for something else. So, for an example, I wanted to read the whole entire New Testament of the Bible last year, right? So, at the beginning of 2024, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to, because before I would be like, I'd try to read like a bunch of chapters, or I would follow like reading plans, and like, most of the reading plans, they'd have you like bounce all over the place, or which is fine, right? Those work. It just seemed like a lot for me, right? So just a simple way that helped me accomplish this is I said every single morning when I wake up, I am going to make a cup of coffee, and then I'm going to leave my Bible on the kitchen table. And once I start making the cup of coffee, I am going to sit down. I'm going to read one chapter a day. And then I took it even farther and I said, I'm going to paraphrase and write at least one note or something I took away from the chapter in my journal.
Yeah.
But I did that every single day. And, I roughly, now I know there's a couple days I missed, but I roughly read the whole entire New Testament in about 240 days, right? Because there's, there's like roughly 240 chapters in the New Testament, I believe.
Sounds
so it takes you about 240 days. And that just worked really, really well for me. But it's keeping it simple, it's keeping it small, it's keeping it manageable, and it's creating that consistency, right? It's something that when I did it, it took me about between 5 and 10 minutes, if that, depending on the chapter, right?
Yeah.
Very manageable.
Oh yeah.
So, but I set up my trigger, I had my action, and essentially kind of the reward was like, I had that connection to God, or felt good afterwards because I was accomplished something, but then also I get to drink coffee as well too.
Yeah.
But that's like a very small version that allows you to achieve big things, and you can do it with a lot of things. But that's an example that I did that helped me be very successful in Bible reading. And I still use the same thing but I'm going through the whole entire Old Testament now too. But roughly I'm doing about the same thing.
I have also seen, we've talked about this with homeschooling moms, they'll put like a special tablecloth on the table as, you could say, a trigger or just a sign that, okay, now it's school time.
That's almost you're into rituals now.
Okay, well, I said I'm not as good at this stuff, but I really liked that because I think, especially being at home with the kids so much, you can really get into this kind of routine or ritual or whatever you want to call it.
Well, so real quick, the difference between a habit and a ritual, right?
Yeah.
A habit is something that has a trigger, action, and reward, or it's something you consistently do over and over again. To me, a ritual is something that signifies a change of state to do something.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It signifies a change of state to do something.
Okay.
Or to get you in a different mindset. So actually, for an example, one thing I did, I read this from somewhere that actually works really well. It's kind of silly, but so for an example, let's even before I even give my example, there's anybody that writes books like Stephen Hawking's, right? Mm-hmm. The guy that wrote all the books.
Yeah.
Like for an example, he before any time he wrote, right, he would sit down and read. He had a ritual that he did. And I'm not getting this 100% correct, but he would walk so many circles around his desk. He would like spin his chair so many times in a circle, and then he would like shuffle and like turn papers over so many times, and then pick up and set a pen in a certain spot. And then when he did that, he would sit down and then start writing.
Interesting.
And that was a ritual that he did to turn his brain on to say to get in a mindset of your writing, your creativity, and getting you could say your zone or your correct state.
Yeah.
And another thing I got, one of my favorite sales books is the Way of the Wolf by Jordan Belfort. Yes, the dude that went to prison for scamming people in penny stocks. Amazing sales book, though, by the way.
Just don't listen to it around your children.
Yeah, this yes.
Don't listen to the audiobook.
That's the only thing I have to say is it's a little vulgar, but
just a little bit.
It's a little vulgar, but his selling methods are extremely effective, and he's a very good salesperson. But they, like, for an example, like another ritual he did is he would snort a line of cocaine before he went to a business meeting. So his thing is he basically anchored himself as, like, when he did cocaine, he turned it, put his right mindset into, like, where he had successful deals, and it was like his sales ritual, right? That put him in I'm not saying it's healthy. It put him in the correct mindset to go do sales meetings.
We went from reading the Bible and homeschooling to cocaine.
I was just using that as an example of a ritual. But
Okay, well,
so
hold
one
on,
thing,
just real quick.
yeah,
There was a few last year. Ian got up on the church's stage to kind of talk about habits and stuff. So I appreciate that you didn't use
I
that
didn't use
example.
that example.
Thank you for not using that example
I
in
do a
front
line
of the
of
church.
I do a line of cocaine before I read the Bible in the morning.
And don't clip that and put it on social media, please.
um, one ritual I use, like, for an example, is we're talking about rituals. It's like a ritual is, right, you're using something to change your state to help you get into the correct mindset to accomplish something, right? So it's not actually doing something; it's putting
Right.
you in the mindset to accomplish something.
I gotcha.
So for an example, one thing that I did was, like, I have, like, a home, like, we have, like, a little home office or whatever. Like, I have a little home office where I work from, and I also, like, I occasionally like to play some video games, right? So and it sounds absolutely crazy, but it does work, and I think it does change your mindset. It gets you more into a zone to work. I had 2 office chairs, right? I have 2 office chairs, right? One office chair I only play games in, and the other office chair I only do work in, right, or work on stuff. And I think it does work because there is something there with the rituals, because it does keep you focused on track. And, like, I sit in this chair, it's like this. I sit in this chair, it's this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like essentially a ritual to ignite a action of getting in the mindset to accomplish or do something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. A lot of speakers like Tony Robbins, he goes, he has a bunch of good books, and he's a motivational speaker and all this stuff. But he says every time before he gets on stage, right, to get him in the correct mindset, he goes in the corner and he, like, jumps up and down so many times and says, like, I forget his mantra. He repeats like 12 times or something, and it takes like 5 deep breaths, and then jumps up again like 5 more times, and then he goes on stage. Like, it's like his ritual that he does to put him in the right mindset to public speak. But so that's the difference between rituals and habits.
Okay, I'm probably gonna mess it up again, but
No, it's okay. And they're like I said, they're pretty similar, but, like,
yeah,
it's honestly really not even that big of a deal.
Yeah,
It's just,
yeah,
like,
I get you. Yeah.
when I guess you get down to, like, the nitty gritty of, like, science of it, they are 2 different things. Like, to me, they're 2 different things. Like,
It makes sense. You explaining it makes total sense. But I'm, like, now, like, thinking of everything I do on a daily basis, and I'm like, is that a habit or a ritual?
right.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, then we talked about that, though. Like, you don't need to overthink those things.
Right.
But
You just gotta do it. You just gotta do it.
right.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of the things that I do with our kids, that Ian does with our kids, that, well, besides Ori maybe, but he has a lot to say about this. Like, every night before we go to bed, we say what we're thankful for. We do our devotion with Eden, and we pray with her. And she says a prayer, and then Daddy finishes it. And she always says the exact same prayer, but that's okay,
Right.
because Jesus knows her heart. But that was one of the things I was thinking of. I'm like, is that a ritual because you're getting ready for bed, but it's also a habit?
Yeah, and honestly, sometimes they both can be combined together as well,
Right.
too.
Yeah.
Ultimately. So the last thing we're going to talk about as well, too, is, and this one gets a little more trickier, but we're just going to do the foundation of this, is breaking bad habits, right? Dealing with bad habits, how to get rid of them, how to reprogram your brain. And you literally, so when you develop a habit and you do it basically over a long period of time, so I would say, like, we read the research article earlier, over 66 days. I definitely say, if you've done something for more than 66 days and you're past that and you're still doing it, it's ingrained into your brain and into your daily habits, rituals, whatever. And so that now, if you've developed a bad habit, to break that and reprogram that is actually can be quite a task. And sometimes it can be even pulling back layers of onions. Like, you cut an onion, there's different layers, and you keep pulling back to get the center part of the onion. It can be a lot like that. because you have to be able to identify what the trigger is to your action. And that gets a lot more trickier.
Yeah.
And like for an example, I listened to, I can't remember what podcast it was, and a couple different things about military stuff. They talk about diagnosing and dealing with PTSD, right, from war. And the tricky part with getting, like, for example, PTSD is, like, let's say someone gets in like an explosion, right, with and half of their squad or whatever is killed, and the person struggling from PTSD from this thing, right? And you're just thinking, right, oh, a big sound of boom and like flashes, right, is maybe the trigger, so something blew up.
Right.
But so what they find is that, so literally 10 minutes before, I'm just using this as a whole hypothetical, right? I'm saying what researchers have found. But let's say this soldier or whatever, before this explosion happened and killed half the people there, his friends and stuff. There was like a black cat that walked in front of him,
Yeah.
right? And so literally they found that, for an example, in this hypothetical example, they found that like the soldiers have been triggered from like the black cat walking in front of them 10 minutes before the explosion, and not actually anything pertaining to the explosion itself.
Huh.
So they've had where like soldiers would be like, they'd see something, like something was triggering them that they couldn't figure out because it made no sense whatsoever. But for some reason, their PTSD tied to the trigger of something very insignificant happening before the event that causes them to have the attacks or the PTSD. And it wasn't actually from maybe something significant in the event, is from something minor. And that's why I say it becomes peeling a layer of onions, right?
Yeah.
Because it gets a lot deeper when you start developing. So something else from the Atomic Habits was that he talked about was, for example, there's this lady that couldn't quit smoking, and she had a barn, and like was a horse, like a horseback riding trainer and all the stuff, and she smoked a whole bunch. And so what ended up happening is her mom, she got old enough, her mom passed away, and she would have to sell her farm, and she moved states, right? Took a different job, everything.
Yeah.
Quit smoking. Right? Like she tried to quit smoking again and quit smoking. Could never do it before. And then one day she actually went back to the farm she was at to go horseback riding because she like knew the people there or whatever. And she immediately wanted to start smoking cigarettes again because of turning to that. And so what they actually found is the study was, so like regardless of, like, even if she was back there, she got on a horse again where she moved to, and she started craving cigarettes again. So what they actually discovered is the trigger to her smoking cigarettes was riding on a horse. And that's what was causing her addiction to, initially making her crave cigarettes, is because she rode horses and smoked a lot.
Yeah.
And that was what tied her habit to wanting to smoke, is riding horses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's super interesting. So with me saying that is, when you're trying to break a new habit, you have to try to realize like what's causing you to want to do that habit, and you have to identify that, and then you have to rewrite it, right? And so for an example, if let's just use smoking for example, because that's a pretty easy one, or even eating food, right? If you can identify what stresses you out, right, or makes you have stress, and you can realize that, you have to then identify it, and then you have to replace it with something good, right? And that's going to do that. And what Jordan Peterson says as well too, if you journal, even if you don't journal, pull out a piece of paper, and if you want to identify that bad habit, write it down on a piece of paper. So it's like for an example, when my boss Bob gets mad at me and yells at me for not doing XYZ to the perfection of whatever he expects me to do, I thought I'd done a good job, I get stressed and I go eat a bunch of Twinkies, right? And write that down on a piece of paper, and then you go down a line, I'm not going to do this anymore. And then you go down another line, when my boss Bob gets mad at me because, right, of blah 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 whatever, and you feel like it's unreasonable, I am now going to go eat 5 carrots, right? Or I'm going to go do, and you kind of insert whatever habit or something that is going to be doable or reasonable and healthier than your previous habit.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of like a very easy way to try to overwrite or deal with bad habits. And like I said, it can get way more trickier than that, but that's the easiest way to do it, is start there. So identify, rewrite them on paper, and then also tell yourself and start taking action on what you're actually going to do when you have that trigger response to the item. And you're going to mess up, and you're going to struggle with it. So have some forgiveness in yourself, and keep trucking along. So, do you have anything you want to add? No, okay. So, thanks for listening today. That's what we talked about: how to create successful habits and how to try to maybe break some of your bad habits. If you have any questions or need help, please let us know. And thanks for listening. Please give us a subscribe, like, all that good stuff, and stay tuned in for all of the new amazing episodes that are going to come out. If you believe it, you can achieve it. And I hope you make some amazing, great habits this year. Thanks for listening.